when you see someone do these like big, giant, powerful carves, you're like, oh, they must just be like pressing and like, pushing so hard, but it's not really like that. It's more of the wave has all this energy and power, and you just kind of need to put yourself in a position and your board in a position to use this force that already is there.
All right, welcome to the Basis Surf Podcast. So excited because we got one of my favorite surfers ever on the pod. We got an incredible goofy footer who charges small waves, big waves, does crazy airs. In fact, Stab said, Parker is one of the best free surfers in the world a little while ago, and it's pretty sick. I have to agree. I'm very excited. Parker, thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm honored to be here talking with you on your podcast. So thanks for having me.
Cool. So we're going to get into all sorts of stuff, growing up in Santa Barbara, surfing out in California, your tips going goofy, going backside because you're a goofy footer in the land of right points, all into style, technique, and the boards that you've developed as well. But the first question I had to ask you, because I remember seeing your swollen face missing almost an eyeball popping up in my feed. Like, was it last winter? Maybe it was 2 winters ago. How gnarly was that, dude? What happened there?
Yeah, so that was December 9th of last year, not this year, but the year before. And my worst surf injury to date for sure. I was kind of bouncing around trying to squeeze a bunch of trips in a tiny little window. So I had just gone to Ireland with Benji Brand, and then I came home and was kind of not feeling that good and saw this crazy swell going to the Caribbean in Barbados. So I jammed over there and got there kind of the night before, woke up the next morning, the waves were firing and just piled out. And I caught a couple kind of warm up waves before, and then just the one just black water set came, and it was such a good wave. And I was this close to actually getting a really good wave, but in the barrel, I kind of hit this unexpected ledge, and I kind of just fell forward, and then the lip kind of pushed me straight down, and I basically cheese grated my whole face on the bottom, broke my nose in 3 places, and ripped my eyelid. I don't know how well you can see, but that's my scar right there.
No.
So it wasn't the obviously ideal way to start the trip, but I was super lucky for a lot of different reasons. The whole kind of Barbados surf community got behind me and helped me get in safe and helped me throughout the hospital experience over there, and just flew straight to Miami and had an incredible surgeon. I don't even know how she did what she did because my eye was so mangled. She basically just put it back together. And now here I am surfing again, and my vision's perfectly good. So really lucky, really lucky.
That is so wild, because I was like, dude, you probably are going to lose an eyeball like that. It just you're just going to be a pirate from there on out. You would have been super cool, dude. You just got the eye patch going on. It'd be sick, man.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was at. I had to wait in the hospital for like 5 hours before anybody saw me. I was just kind of sitting there going through, obviously, like just the wave of emotions. And at one point I was like, fuck, man, I don't really know if my eye's in there anymore. And then I was kind of just like, whatever. I'll be like that old crazy guy at the local spot with an eye patch. Just that's going to be me, I guess. I'm just going to accept my fate while it's happening, So luckily that was not the case. So super stoked.
Well, so was that better or worse? Because I remember also seeing this one clip, like you're like flying in the air, your legs are spread open, and then I see the tip of the surfboard like bounce off your ankle, and then it goes off your knee, and it gets closer and closer, and then boop, like a perfect tap. I could see like spray coming off that thing. I was like, oh, that looks awful, man. As well.
That was actually like my best performed clip last year, which was pretty ironic. Like, as much as we try to go rip and get big barrels and do turns and airs, all I needed to do on Instagram was just get hit in the nuts by my surfboard. So I got it. Surfing, it's crazy though. Like, if you don't do it, maybe you don't really understand how beat up you get. But any surfer that's been surfing for a long time definitely has a couple good wipeout stories. And I'm lucky to have a camera on me a lot. So a lot of my good wipeouts are very well documented for other people to laugh at.
Oh, man. I mean, both of those situations. I mean, I have a scar right here, point of the surfboard right into my nose. I nearly lost an eye there. And I've had the love tap as well. That's That's always a scary one. Mine was the fins were like spinning around and I could see it just like rotating quickly coming at me. And I was like, oh my God, family jewels are going to be gone.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying,
Oh
but
man.
so fun. That's why we all still do it.
Would you rather lose an eye? Would you rather lose an eye or one of the family jewels? Which one would you rather lose?
Dude, good question. I guess I don't really know the long-term effect of losing a family jewel, but I could probably one nut better than I could one eye. So I guess I'd
Right?
probably rather lose a nut.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm in the same boat as you. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. This conversation went in one crazy direction. All right. We got to bring it back. All right. We're going to bring it back to the beginning. Um, Well, okay, let's start at the beginning. I mean, your brother Connor Coffin, incredible surfer as well. What was it like growing up with Connor? I mean, it must have been sick to have like a best friend, sparring partner, somebody to like go on all these trips with and surf with all at the same time. What was that like growing up together with him?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't be who I am without him for sure. And my dad, I think, just made a really solid point, and my mom, but they both made a really solid point when we were young that we were going to be best friends, you know? So my whole childhood, I don't know, looking back, I was so lucky on the type of older brother that I had because he never tried to exclude me. He never tried to, not let me hang out with him because I was younger or anything like that. It was always the opposite. It was always like, oh, dude, you can do it. Come on, like, come with me. We're going to do it together kind of thing. And a lot of his friends were older than he was. So I'm 2 years and a couple months younger than my brother. And then all of his friends were another 2 or 3 years ahead of him. So I was basically just the runt of the litter at all times. And, I was pretty, had a lot of energy, and I definitely wasn't short of confidence at that age. And I just, kind of talked smack to a lot of the older guys, and they put me in my place at a young age. And I felt like, looking back, I was so grateful that I was allowed to be around the people that I was around. And definitely who you hang out with and who you surround yourself with is a big part of who you become. And my brother, outside of my parents, probably has had more influence on me and the person that I am. Yeah, so I'm super grateful for Connor for surfing, but then just life. So
Yeah,
good
for
guy.
for sure, for sure. And they talk a lot how oftentimes like the younger sibling becomes they get really good essentially because they're chasing the whole time. They're younger, so they're just like chasing, and they're always like a little bit behind, but that gives them this drive that just makes them be like, oh, I got to beat my brother, but he's older than me, and then but it develops this mentality, and then they get really, really good. And I would assume that there has to be some part of that with you and Connor, even though I'm sure you guys are like super tight and it's all love at the end of the day. But it would be
Yeah.
interesting to have that kind of someone that close to you and be a role model, but you could also like study them so much and all those things. I don't know if that was the way it was for you at all. Or
Yeah, mine, it definitely, first of all, like my brother pushed me more than anybody. And I would say that we had a pretty healthy relationship in the way that we pushed each other. It was pretty interesting actually, because when we were younger, I was a full skateboarder. Like that was
mm,
my thing. I was just that I played basketball and I skateboarded. And my brother, pretty much from the second he stood on a surfboard, was obsessed with surfing, and I wasn't. So
mm,
it kind of took me a little bit longer to get into it. I think because it's cold where I live, it was hard for me to really enjoy my time in the water.
yeah,
Um, and so my brother kind of just instantly connected with surfing, and surfing was kind of always his thing. And when I started to get into surfing, I felt like I always just respected how much he had connected with it from the get go. And he just had a really natural sense of kind of positioning and reading the wave. And he kind of has that special, subtle skill in surfing of being in the right place at the right time and reading the ocean and all that. And I didn't really have that. I would say that my background, I was an athlete, like more, I
mm,
played sports, I skateboarded, I did all this stuff. And I think I had talent in in the way that I could move my body kind of thing. But learning the whole part about surfing and reading the ocean and all that, I mean, I'm still working on it. And so I still have the utmost respect for guys like my brother, Benji Brand, John Florence, like those guys that are able to go out in the lineup and hunt and position themselves. Um, but yeah, it's just my brother's pushed me so much, and I've learned so much from him. And it's funny, he's not actually the best teacher, I'd say. So I kind of, from a young age, I just had to get kind of in the mindset of like, how do I extract the information from this guy that's really good at it? And I just asked a million questions throughout my whole childhood. And obviously that kind of bled into all the other relationships that I had, whether it be shapers and other surfers. And I would say probably the most beneficial part of getting better has been just through kind of conversation with other people and just asking whatever it is that I've been curious about. And if they don't give me an answer the first time, I'm going to ask a second and a third time and a fourth time. And so, yeah, Connor, now I would say like he's the easiest person for me to talk to about surfing because we've developed together. We have a similar vocabulary. We have a connection in the way that we can talk about boards, about turns, about conditions, swells. So yeah, it's my surf buddy.
Hey everyone, my name is Van, and I'm an everyday surfer that's just obsessed with improving. And I wanted to take everything that I've learned, everything that I've struggled with, all the mistakes that I've learned along the way, and share it with you to help you become the best surfer that you can be. And I'm super lucky on this podcast, I get to interview the world's top pros, shapers, coaches, and take you along on my journey as I try to learn, uncover all the gold so you can apply to your own surfing. So hopefully you're going to get some value out of this. And the best way you can support me is just simply by sharing this podcast with whoever else you think may benefit from it. I also have been working really hard for a long time on something that I think is going to help a ton of people. I know that it was a game changer for myself as well. But more to come on that over the next coming months. I'm super excited. Thank you for all the support. And for those of you just joining for the first time, welcome to the Basis community. Super stoked to have you. Interesting. So it sounds like you get pretty analytical when you're thinking about technique and whatnot. I interviewed Zeke Lau last week, and he was telling me like there's kind of two types of pro surfers. Some who are like super intuitive and they can't even really explain what they're doing. And then there's others that just like really nerd out and talk about all the fine details. And it sounds like you're in that latter camp.
Absolutely. My dad, he surfed and he always really appreciated surfing and how cool of just an experience riding a wave was. And when my brother and I started to get into it, he wasn't an ex-pro or he didn't really know what to do. So my dad always just really helped us kind of seek out information. And I felt like from a young age, my brother and I were just hungry to learn. And we, obviously had somewhat of natural skills, but from day one, we just have been on this quest of learning, and we've had so many people that have been influential in that process. We kind of grew up surfing around in Santa Barbara with a group of kids in the surf school called Santa Barbara Seals, ran by JP Garcia. And then that kind of transitioned into our best friend's dad, Toma Tomatsuri, who's an insane surf coach. And then from him, guys like kind of Dave Latinsky, and then Brad Gerlach was kind of the one, though, that I felt like really instilled the analytical nuances of surfing, that it just kind of made it more fun for me. And it opened up this just ultimate rabbit hole of going down for the rest of my life, trying to match my current state of like my body and my mind to my boards, to the conditions, all these different things. And yeah, I kind of just been following that analytical track ever since, because I feel like that's what keeps me excited. It keeps me having fun. Keeps things fresh. And there are definitely guys that have no idea what the hell they're doing on a surfboard, but they're super good at it. And I have so much respect for those guys, because it must be nice to just not think and just do it. But I truly enjoy the process of analyzing and going through all the different aspects of surfing. And I think for where I'm at in my career, being a free surfer, that lends super nicely to the path that I've taken. And I think if you're a competitive surfer and you're going to go towards the tour, it's really hard to be that analytical. You kind of just need to tune down the head noise and, go out and kind of just do what you know how to do in a time frame. So, yeah.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. I would have almost imagined it would be the opposite in some ways, where if you're a competitive, well, I get what you're saying, right? You're a competitive surfer. You don't want to be second guessing yourself, analyzing yourself, because that'll trip you up and you'll get in your head when you're in your heat and whatnot. But that's where also it's almost like, oh, you need to be like at the very bleeding edge of progression and all of that, just in terms of performance. And then as a free surfer, you don't have to be as like on it. Well, that's really, I guess it really depends what type of free surfer you are, right? There's like those free surfers that are much more steezy, and they're not trying to push maneuvers, but you're the kind of free surfer that is really pushing maneuvers and also incredibly stylish as well. So I guess you're probably the exception from somebody that's just a little bit more cruisy in their style. I guess I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, and for me, I did compete for a super long time,
Right.
so I guess I'm a free surfer with a competitive background.
Right.
And I do think most free surfers are competitive in their own way. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time, I mean, I'm super competitive, don't get me wrong. But I'm finding an environment that I can be super competitive with myself. And I'm just trying to put myself in the positions of waves that I feel like I can do the surfing that I've always dreamt about doing. And
Mm.
I've watched so many surf movies and studied so much surfing all these years that I have a pretty clear picture, I think, of what I'd like to surf like in my head, and just trying to find the opportunity to be able to make that happen, and being okay with falling, being okay with, maybe going out and not getting a single clip, but then I might have one moment where it finally clicks a little bit.
Mm.
And yeah, for me, it's just, you can be really competitive in
Right.
so many different ways. And
Right.
the tour is so competitive, and those guys are analyzing and pushing themselves to the extreme. I just feel that then they have to have the skill of being able to like turn off all that analyzing and everything. And in free surfing, I don't really have to turn it off ever. I can go ride every single wave and think and feel how I could make it better, and I can analyze every single nuance of my board or my arm or this and that, because I want it to look a certain way and feel a certain way. Where
Right.
those guys, they kind of have a task at hand, and that's to go do their best that they possibly can in that window, and put themselves in the best position they can, so they can beat that other guy and advance on to the next heat. So it's just a different type of competition,
Right.
I'd say.
No, no, you're right. You're right. And that's what I'm Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The format for your competition is just different, right? You're just trying
Yeah.
to create the sickest clip where you're doing the sickest maneuvers or whatever, and but it's not over like, okay, you got this much time for heat. It's like in actually some ways it's almost worse, because it's like if I don't come back with a clip where I feel like I really performed at my best, then you're gonna be bummed, right? So I see that. I see that. Huh.
Yeah, it's fun though. And for me now, I'm really just trying to bring forth, I guess, kind of what I was saying of what I think my surfing can be, and that's my quest. It's not necessarily, I guess, like the best clip or the best this or the best that. It's just like, can I surf the way that I want to surf? Can
Hmm.
I take all this stuff that I have kind of learned over the years, and I see it in my head, and can I package it all up and you know do what I think I could possibly do? And that's kind of the motivation for my surfing right now. Is it's like, all right, dude, like take all these things that you think are cool of all these other surfers and try to package them up and implement them into my own package, and that's kind of what I'm the most excited about now, because if you can find waves and dream of the special wave that I want to surf, those waves, and then get the footage and study it and kind of keep improving. I'm 28, and I feel like I've probably improved more the last 4 years than I have in my whole life, just because I love it so much. It's really easy for me to put a lot of time and effort into, and I'm just a total fan of it all. So I love it.
No, I mean, I mean, I can't even, I shouldn't even comment on your surfing, but I mean, I feel like I've seen like over the past 4 years, like that, that like the progression and improvement is insane. And, you're, it feels like it's all coming together in terms of your style and your technique. Like actually I was hanging out in Central America with Anton, Allen, who you know as well, right?
Yep.
We were both tripping out about your surfing. We were just talking about it, and we are like, dude, I was talking to him. I was like, dude, I can't. There's something about the way you move your body that I was like, we were struggling. Like, how do I put my finger on like what it is that you're doing that makes it just look so good? And then I realized, I was like, dude, like your front arm is so relaxed. It's like dangling around like a noodle. Like there's zero tension in that arm. You know, most people, they're like, huh, 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 you know, like their arms are like, they're like karate chopping. We're talking about like just your, you know, your everyday surfer, wherever. But like yours is so loose. And it just like when you're doing all your maneuvers, it's just so relaxed that it adds this special kind of like, I don't know, flair or something to your style. And then you're combining that with this radical surfing as well, this really powerful surfing. So, and then he was like, Anton was like, dude, I noticed the exact same thing. He was like, dude, you're a freaking nerd when it comes to surfing. I'm like, I guess I am, but
Uh,
I don't
well,
know
well,
that.
thank you. Yeah, it's
So
something. Yeah, or yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
no,
Whatever
I was gonna
question.
say like, so you know, is this style that you're developing, is this like intentional? This is analytical? Is this something that you're working on? Like, how do you think about your progression? Like what goes through your brain as you're developing your style and your technique and all that?
Well, I guess. Well, thank you. That was very complimentary. But I guess when I think of the way that I surf, and yeah, I think a lot of people kind of comment about my front arm being a little bit more relaxed or whatever it is. But honestly, like I try to move that thing. I'm like, and that's the weirdest part, you know. It is just it's the way that I stand on a surfboard, and
Wow.
I try to implement a little bit more tension in it, and then it just looks bad. So then you know it's kind of funny, but there was I guess a point when I was about maybe 16 years old. So I guess that would have made John about 18 or 19. And I was working with Brad Gerlach really closely. And we were both watching John kind of really take off in his career. And, you know, he was pretty much everybody's favorite surfer at that time.
Right.
And we were both just like, what is it? What is it? Why are we so just
Right.
impressed? And why does it look so cool? And John was one of the first people that I ever really noticed that kept his hands down by his sides when he was just doing crazy radical stuff.
Right.
And Gurr was like, dude, try it, whatever, just see what it feels like. See if you just stand up and let your arms completely be noodly, see what
Mm.
it's like. And so that was when I was about 16. And I think from that point on, I was just like, oh, cool. Like, I'm just going to relax my arms. And whatever they're doing is kind of what they're doing. You know, I'm not really in control of it in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of wherever I'm turning and wherever I'm moving, they're going to go. And it's funny now, though, I've kind of noticed I'm limited in some ways by that being stuck down by my side.
Interesting.
And I feel like I've watched John go through a similar experience with his turns. And I feel like John's turns have gotten so much better these last probably 4 or 5 years. And so I'm actually trying to implement a little bit more tension and just awareness through my front hand, which will hopefully allow me to kind of open my shoulders and transfer through my hips and everything, you know? So for me, now that's kind of I feel like where I can see myself progress the in the biggest way is by kind of incorporating my whole body movement a little bit more and kind of allowing my front hand to be a little bit more tension isn't the right word, but maybe just awareness, you know, a little bit more controlled movement pattern that will rotate all the way through my fingertips. And I think that's kind of when you start getting to that, where your rotation is like exploding and spiraling, that's just the pinnacle of power surfing on the face of the wave. And I feel like John's doing it, Ethan's doing it. There's a lot of guys that are doing it. But yeah, that's kind of the next level of where I see myself being able to progress is by, you know, waking up a couple things that maybe aren't awake yet when I'm riding the wave. And
Mm.
yeah, that's the fun part though. Like I'm gonna try it, and if it doesn't work, then I'm gonna can do my same thing that I was doing before. But I
Well,
do see that as an opportunity to get better for myself.
yeah. Well, I will say, just from a style perspective, like the way you finish your front side turns, where you're, you know, that front arm is just down, it's set down, and then you kind of bring your back arm all the way through, and it feels like it like closes it off. and then the way your stance is, it just looks really good because that when you finish it, you look so relaxed because both your arms are down in a way, you know. But I can see where if you don't like fully rotate and open up with that front arm, you know, you don't open up quite as much in finishing the turn. But I guess what really trips me out when I think about it as well is, you know, there's a lot of similarities from like a front side carve to a backside bottom turn.
Mhm.
But when you wind up for your backside bottom turn, you like rotate, like your entire body is like so twisted. Like I think that is what you're known for going backside, and you're known for being incredible on your backside as well. But like most people when they're going backside, they're like looking at 10 o'clock, right? You're at like 2 o'clock in your rotation when you're going with your backside bottom turn and then going up to, you know, do your top turn or whatever. And so that's crazy to me that like it doesn't carry over from your backside versus your front side. You know, do you know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing because, I mean, I've spent so much time on my backhand just growing up where I live in Santa Barbara. There's so many rights. And yeah, I just probably a little bit more comfortable on my heels coming off the bottom of the wave, looking at the lip versus kind of when you're doing a frontside carve and you're leaning onto your heels. It's kind of like if you're sitting in a rocking chair and there's that little bit of like rolling back where it's kind of a little bit uncomfortable and it's like you're falling, you know? And so for me, the backside bottom turn, I'm not getting that like moment of kind of, you know, I'm
Mm,
like planted on my board and I'm super kind of, my chest is kind of coming down into my knees and I'm able to kind of weight my heels, hold the line, and then until I can kind of see the lip, I can choose then whether I want to kind of do a last minute like turn up and get a little bit more vertical, or if I want to kind of keep it horizontal and do a carve. So I think I've just had so many more reps on my backhand throughout the years that that's just a bit more of a natural position for me to do kind of what I'm talking about easier.
mm,
Where now it's kind of funny because I've been doing the free surf thing and I've just wanted to improve my front side so bad. So I've kind of just been going to lefts. And I finally feel like it's been years and years and years of getting comfortable into my heels off the top of the wave. And I'm starting to get that sensation more. Now I just kind of need to dial in the rest of the part, you know, like I guess, function of my arms and all that into it. But I'm finally starting to feel like I'm getting a little bit more comfortable coming from my toes off the bottom, rolling onto my heels, and then kind of like projecting the carve. Um, but yeah, it's just lots of practice, and I've watched so much backside footage over the years. You know, my hero is Bobby Martinez, and he's from the same town as me. So Bobby and Aki, I just watched so much of their footage, and most of their footage is backside footage. So
yeah.
you know, but I definitely am doing my best to learn how to kind of incorporate what I know how to do on my backside bottom turn into front side carve off the top.
That's so crazy to me that, you know, a surfer at your level, you're still thinking like, oh man, I need to work on this in my surfing, work on that. And like, you're like, I'm not comfortable doing a frontside turn. I'm just like, dude, that looks like the sickest frontside carve, you know, but I think number one, it speaks to your, you know, your humility. And I think that is part of the reason why you're probably so good because you're just constantly like, how do I improve this? How do I get better? Even at your level, you're still just like, how do I take it to that next level? Which is, you know, which is really really cool. But yeah, and you're just that drive to just continue learning and improving. I mean, that's so rad.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
so what's interesting to me though is like, so I was gonna ask this question. Like, you grew up as a goofy foot in the land of like right hand points. Well, first of all, did you like decide to be a goofy foot because Connor was a regular foot, and you're like, I'm gonna do the exact opposite of him, or are you just like, this is just naturally how it rolled?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of naturally how it rolled. My family was on vacation to Kauai when we were really little kids, and that was the first time that Connor and I had ever surfed. There was just this long kind of rolling whitewash, and honestly, like barely knew how to swim. I had floaties on. I didn't even know how to swim really. So I was two, and my brother was he was I think four, just about to turn five, and yeah, I don't know, just from the get go, like even in the old family videos, like you see me kind of just like naturally stand up as a goofy foot.
Yeah.
And then you see Connor kind of just naturally stand up as a regular foot. And it's weird how it works, but I think just throughout all the years of meeting a lot of different regular foots and goofy foots, it's kind of a personality thing. And so I'm 100% a goofy foot.
Yeah.
and,
That.
and my brother's 100% a regular foot, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just kind of who we are, who our personalities are. And yeah, it's just interesting how that all works out that way. But I'm a goofy
No,
foot,
that
thoroughbred.
that's so funny because I was going to ask you this question. I was like, do you think there is something about being a goofy foot? And it seems goofy footers like end up having this certain kind of style when it comes to surfing. I just interviewed Dane Gudauskas, and he's like definitely more. He's a goofy foot in his family, I think, and he definitely has a very unique style. And then you think like Ryan Birch, Craig Anderson, those guys are all super stylish, all goofy footers, and it's like it's interesting how that all uh, comes together like that. And it sounds like that has been your experience as well. But being a goofy footer in the land at right hand points, did you ever feel like you're disadvantaged or get frustrated with that, or did you just like adapt to it and get used to it and whatever?
I feel like if there wasn't as many good goofy foot surfers around, it would have been easy to kind of go down that rabbit hole. But I was like growing up and watching Bobby Martinez surf Rincon, and I'm like, yep, that looks pretty good. It looks like he's doing just fine on his backhand, you know. So I never really thought of it as a
Yeah.
disadvantage per se, but I always the one thing actually that I felt like was a super big advantage was that I was surfing such long, clean, perfect waves on my backhand
Mm.
that if you do the same thing over and over and over again, it's kind of going to get boring when you're riding the waves. So for me, I felt like I had the advantage of having this long canvas to learn how to do the subtle, different kind of types of turns on my backhand. And I'd say that once you get past that kind of, oh, there's not that much I can do on my backhand, all of a sudden it just opens up into a world of all these subtle nuances that allow you to do different things. Similar, I guess, variety or similar types of movements, but like really slim differences that change it all. You know, like if you're watching Bobby Martinez come off the bottom and go vertical, but he's still carving at the top of the lip versus a lot of guys you see, they just kind of do that same bump, bump up off the lip, you know? So I never felt like I had a disadvantage in any way. And I love going backside. Even still, it's funny. Like I went left majority of the time this last year that I've been trying to film, and I'm kind of hungry to find a right. So yeah, it's so fun. It's just so different, you know. But I
Yeah.
feel like the way you move, and it's interesting because backside coming off the top, you kind of have your head as leverage to come off the top, and then
Mm.
front side, obviously you're using your butt as leverage and like dropping your butt and kind of using all that. So it's just different, super different. I wouldn't say that I like one more than the other per se, but just so much opportunity to kind of express yourself differently on those two directions, you know. And obviously front side you can see a little bit more, so you can kind of have a little bit more of a relaxed approach, I would say, where backside I kind of can't see quite as much, so I'm a little bit more just kind of going by feel, I guess.
Mm.
um, but yeah, I like both.
Yeah. I mean, I've surfed Malibu like once or twice. Oh my God. The one time I did get to surf it, it was pumping. It was insane. But there was also like 100 people out.
Yeah.
It was so funny. There, I paddled out. I mean, it was really good. There was like, I don't know, yeah, 50, 100 people out. And then this local rolls up and he's like, I don't forget exactly what he said. But he was like, "Where are all these people from?" He's just like, he was so bummed. And I can kind of understand if that's his home spot. But one thing I noticed about the wave though is I mean, it's described as this perfect point, but there's some really fast sections, and I could imagine, even on your front hand, it can be hard to make those sections, that on your backhand it gets even a little trickier. Were there any, what tips would you give to somebody that's surfing backside and, they're struggling to generate speed or, make it around sections and just do turns in general? What are your tips for someone going backside?
Yeah, I mean, definitely feel like probably learning how to get speed on your backhand's a little bit harder than it is to get speed on your front side. Um, I'd say the most common mistake I see people make backhand when they're trying to get going down the line at a faster wave is they don't really utilize the top of the wave. They're always kind of at the bottom and they're kind of trying to do movements at the bottom of the wave. But to really get speed, you have to ride the transition and you have to get high and then you want to project low and then you kind of want to do that same. And when you see someone doing it well, you can really kind of understand like the flow of speed. But yeah, I would say a lot of people, they don't utilize that top part of the wave. And
Mm.
at a spot that's fast, you have to be up at the top, ideally as quick as possible. If the wave's running down the line, you can kind of take off and instantly get your board up and then ride the transition down and kind of project out. Um, Rincon, I don't surf Malibu that much, but definitely Rincon has parts of the point that are pretty fast too. And yeah, it's just you take that information of being at the top of the wave and then you kind of build your whole style and technique out of that. You kind of have to do what feels right for you and
Yeah.
depending on what kind of board you ride and all that. But yeah, I'd say the most common mistake I see people not using is the top of the wave.
Yeah, totally. Did I say Malibu? I meant Rincon.
Oh yeah.
No,
You did say.
I meant Rincon. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I meant Rincon. Dude,
It's
it's such a sick wave. I mean, yeah.
such a good wave. Yeah,
I,
it's honestly, it's such a good wave. I kind of trip out sometimes because I have done a lot of winters in Hawaii these last few years, or actually, I guess since I was like 13, I try to go to Hawaii as much as possible. So I haven't surfed it quite as much as I did when I was really young. But I try to, if I see a good swell, I always try to make sure that I'm in town for it. And every
yeah.
time that wave's good and our whole community shows up and kind of spends the day at the beach, it's pretty special.
Yeah. I don't know how many barrels I saw that day. It was wild, and it's so much friendlier than the waves in the North Shore of Hawaii.
Yeah, for
Except
sure.
for maybe Lonnie's or something like that. But yeah, yeah, it's North Shore Hawaii. Oahu is pretty gnarly. So what's actually interesting to me now, because you grew up going backhand most of the time, and then you had to and it seems like you're on this mission to do really good frontside wraps or frontside carves. Like, were there any unlocks that you figured out that really helped you with your frontside carves, or is it just more getting the repetitions in, or what was it for you?
Definitely repetitions help. I think you just start to kind of build the awareness of what's actually happening when you're doing it, and then you can kind of process it a little bit easier. But I felt like I had a major breakthrough on the trip that I was just on, which is just you don't have to push nearly as hard as you think, in my opinion. When you see someone do these like big, giant, powerful carves, you're like, oh, they must just be like pressing and like, pushing so hard. But it's weird. It's not really my experience. It's not really like that. It's more of the wave has all this energy and power. And you just kind of need to put yourself in a position and your board in a position to use this force that already is there. And for me, if I'm kind of trying too hard and I want to rip, I'm pushing. And when I'm pushing, I feel like my board's sinking into the face of the wave. I'm catching, I'm tense, I'm not flowing as much. So, yeah, for me, my major breakthrough that I've been kind of realizing is use the wave and don't forcefully push into it because you get tense and you kind of aren't allowing your body to just rotate and move, So it's a little counterintuitive, I guess, in that way. But I felt like when I started to really understand that and just be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna just let the wave do the work and I'm gonna position myself accordingly. I'm gonna get my board in a place that I want it to be, and then I'm gonna let the wave do the work. It just big difference for me.
Fascinating, really. Wow. Because most people think like, yeah, you got to push as hard as I can in the wave, but it sounds like, I mean, that's probably the highest expression is when you just put yourself in that perfect section of the wave, and then the wave does all the work, right?
And it's
Wow, interesting.
interesting because you power surfing, right?
Right.
Rob Machado is not a huge guy, but if you watch him surf, he's so powerful and explosive. And, same with Tom Curran. Like Tom Curran's not a crazy built, jacked guy, but there's just time and time again proof that you don't need to be some giant, super muscly guy to surf big and surf strong.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think I naturally have like a little bit more of a dense build, and I have like kind of muscle on my body. So for me, the main thing that I'm trying to do is maintain flexibility and joint mobility to be able to kind of move through places and get my body into positions that I want to get it in critical parts of the wave so I can use the wave.
Interesting. Fascinating. That's super fascinating. So it sounds like you train a lot, your mobility, just flexibility. Do you do any paddle training? I'd interviewed Zeke and he was like, yeah, I used to surf 6 to 8 hours a day. And then on top of that, I would go and paddle. He was a monster when it came to that. Cause he's like, I need that extra ammo in my heats. I got to have that backup. But I don't know for you, how important is paddle training or just paddling in general as a surfer?
I mean, paddling, they should have called surfing paddling because you paddle way more than you ride waves. But yeah, I guess I don't necessarily train my paddling as much. I paddle when I surf, and regardless of what the conditions are like, I try to bring a pretty good amount of energy to my sessions, more so when the waves are shitty. I like use it as an opportunity to just kind of do a workout if the waves aren't that good. And then if the waves are good, then I want to get back out to the lineup faster and I'm sprinting my paddles and stuff. But yeah, so I would say that when I'm surfing, I'm in I'm kind of intentionally pushing myself and my paddle ability during my sessions. And then outside of my sessions, I'm not grabbing a paddleboard. I don't do that. I
Yeah.
probably should. It would probably be beneficial. But
Right.
no, the form of cardio that I've kind of found that works the best for myself is the assault bikes. Have you ever seen those?
Okay. The
Obviously,
ones where you're pushing as well as yeah.
yeah, and obviously super not similar position or anything to paddling, but I can spike my heart rate in 5 seconds, and I can get super comfortable being in a position of like gasping for air, and in surfing, in my experience and kind of what's worked for me, it's kind of, you need to have that energy to be able to paddle super hard, use your body in high demand for X amount of time. And then when you jump on your board to go paddle back out, you have a second of recovery.
Yeah.
So the thing that I felt like has overall helped my endurance and just my mindset of how I feel when I'm gassed is that assault bike. Like I just do 15 to 20 seconds of super all out intense work, and then I give myself 15-20 seconds break, and then I'm going all out 15-20 seconds, and I just get more used to that feeling of kind of just being completely gassed. you know
Yeah.
but yeah, that's different for everybody, and I feel like for me, if I were to surf 6 to 8 hours and then go in and go paddle again, it's kind of that similar muscle chain getting used over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. And I think for me and my body and the way I feel when I'm at my best, everything's more balanced out. So if I
Mm.
go paddle for 6 to 8 hours, then I better go figure out a way to turn on all those other muscles that didn't
Right.
get used.
For sure.
And I guess kind of, yeah, placing importance on managing muscle imbalances, because surfing definitely creates a lot of awkward muscle imbalances that pop up later in life.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, circling back to something you said earlier that I thought was really interesting, you were talking about how one of the big unlocks in your surfing has been really just putting yourself into more critical parts of the wave, as opposed to like forcing it. And I'm sure like a big part of that and being able to do those turns in those critical parts of the waves are the boards that you ride, and you go from doing the fish beard, which is small waves, to doing the CI Pro, which is like super rockered out. Was that part of the reason why you? And I remember you posting about it, you were talking about it when you were starting to develop it. You're like, yeah, I'm getting into you know playing around with more rocker in my boards. Was that part of the intention? You wanted to like find the board or develop a board that would allow you to get into those more critical parts of the waves, or what was that?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, just a little bit of backstory, I guess. The fish beard kind of came about right after I stopped competing,
Okay.
and I wanted to rip but I also just wanted to do something completely different and like enjoy, I guess, this newfound freedom that I felt in my surfing of just like, I can ride whatever I want. I'm not trying to please anybody. I'm not trying to get a score or whatever. So I was seeing Asher Pacey and Glenn Hall do this amazing surfing on these twin fins, but ripping. And I
Right.
kind of just went to Channel Islands and was like, hey, I want to have a board that I can rip on, but is super user friendly and fun and goes fast, easy. So that was kind of where the fish beard came about. And then I rode that a lot for a couple years, and that thing's a plank and a twin fin and whatever. I had so much fun. I felt like it helped me smooth out my style a little bit. And then I think just by riding that the time that I rode it, I just naturally craved something that was the exact opposite.
Right.
And Britt would laugh at this because this is like my board theories in a nutshell. Like I'll go down one and then I'm like, oh, but the opposite's kind of killer, you know? So I'm a little bit irregular in that sense, but
Well, they
yeah, so
both
the
seem to be like incredibly popular, right? And just dwelling on the fish beard for a second, like I remember there was this one wave that you caught on it, and it was like literally, it was like the wave had just like ended and it was literally flat, and you were just like pumping on flat water for like, I don't know, it looked like 15 feet until it reformed, and then you did a roundhouse, and then it went back in the opposite direction, and you hit the white water. Anyway, it was like I was like, that board looks like it's going so fast, and like the smallest wave, it was insane.
and that was what I wanted though, you know? Like I was gonna stop competing and I was gonna kind of I had plans to be home a little bit more through summer and this and that. And the twin fin thing, it just unlocked this level of speed that I'd never felt before. I'd been pretty used to riding your traditional grovelers and small waves with, you know, thrusters and that gap between those two twin fins and the way that water just seems to rush off the tail, it's glide, you know. That's like the feeling that I call it. It's glide. And for me, that was the original feeling that made me psyched on surfing. So it was kind of like this awakening of why I started to surf again at a point where I was just feeling a little bit mentally beat up by contests and losing this and that, you know. So it was a major unlock of just the simplicity of riding a wave for what it is. And then I felt like I did that. And then I was kind of like, all right, cool. Like I'm definitely having fun riding waves again. I don't need to worry about that. Now I want to try to rip and I want to put
Yeah.
something that's super high performance together. And it was also at a time when the boards at Channel Islands were going through a bit of a plateau and kind of some team riders had been leaving. And so Britt kind of came to me and was like, dude, we need to develop a high performance surfboard. And you live close. I can talk to you about boards. You're pretty articulate. And him and I just started down this rabbit hole of super intensely working together. Like he was making me one or two boards. I'd go ride it. I'd film and I'd come back with just pages of notes on what I felt and drawings of where I thought it could kind of improve. And we just started taking it really incrementally and like slowly kind of working on it for, I want to say we probably worked on it for about a year before anybody else had really had one.
Wow.
And we then got to a place where I was like, all right, I feel good about it. I'm stoked. Get these out to some of the team guys. And then the feedback was pretty good. And then, you know, it's kind of evolved since. And now we have the CI 2.0 Pro. And, but that, yeah, I was so lucky that Britt was willing to put forth the time and effort into giving me the platform to create something with him, you know. And obviously he's the one that's creating it in the room, but it's both of us coming together with ideas and learning how to communicate with each other better. And um, such a fun process.
Yeah. I mean, the results, like you got the proof in the pudding. Like it won Stab in the Dark twice, right? Twice in a row with Jack and Italo. I mean, I'm super curious. Like, what was that whole process like figuring out that rocker? I mean, you mentioned like pages of notes. Like, how many iterations did you have to go through to dial in that rocker and that outline and all that? You know, because when I was just looking at that board versus a lot of other boards, it just seems way more rockered out and knifey than a lot of the other boards. I don't know, but it seemed like almost like a proton when you look at the outline in a way. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sick actually. And then the surfing you guys are doing, I was like, oh, okay, that thing is actually super sick. So yeah, just like, how many revisions did you have to do to get to where it was today?
Definitely went through a lot of revisions. But yeah, it was interesting. I guess the main board that I had been riding right before was the Too Happy, and that was the one that Britt was kind of developing, and I jumped on towards the tail end, and I rode that for about a year. And the way that that board is, it's a pretty staged rocker, meaning so like the middle of the board is pretty relatively flat, and then there's
Yeah.
kind of a kick, almost like a skateboard, and it's pretty drastic, and it's yeah, it's a pretty harsh change in curve, you know. And I had been surfing lowers a little bit, and Cordell Miller, super good guy from California, incredible shaper in his own right, was watching me surf and kind of, you know, told me that I should be on a more consistent curve. He thought it would benefit the way that I surfed a little bit more than kind of that harsh adjustment. And he actually made me a board, and I liked it, hung out with him, surfed it, and then never like showed it to Britt or anything, but just told him, I'm like, dude, Cordell made me this board that's like constant curve. Can you make me something like that? And
Mm.
so he made me the first version, like his kind of interpretation of a board with constant curve. And then I want to say we probably went through about 5 different variations of that first curve. And then from the rocker, we then went to the concave, and we dialed in what I thought kind of felt the best concave wise, which ultimately ended up being, you know, a pretty light single through the front of the board into a slight double. Kind of gets a little bit more drastic double right in between the fins, and then flattens off the tail again. And then after we kind of got the concave, we went to the rails, and I just messed with the shape of the rails, you know, like especially this part, like how much surface area there actually was of the rail versus kind of a smaller surface area that was like your more traditional tapered rail. And I want to say we did probably about 5 or 6 boards, just different tests of rails. And then the final step was really just kind of dialing in the fin placement.
Mm.
And that was actually probably the one that we struggled with the most out of all of them, because the fins have so many variables in a sense of where you're putting them up and down the board, the
Yeah.
cluster being tight or far apart, how close they are to the rail, and then also the angle of the fin.
Yeah.
So it's funny because you'd think that that would be the most easy one to just like, oh yeah, standard measurement, here you go, doot, doot, doot. But that was the one where him and I were just like, is this one better, is that one better? I don't really know. This one's drivier, but this one feels like it's a little bit easier to turn. And so yeah, that was kind of the final piece of the puzzle, that when we got the fins in a place that I felt good with, he rode one, he felt good with it. And then I forget who the first person we got aboard to, but Britt and I, we knew that they kind of got their board, and we were waiting for the response of if it worked or whatever. And I remember the second we got the response back saying that they liked it, him and I were both just like, yeah. And then it was crazy because I loved it, Britt loved it, that guy loved it, and we made a couple more. And then, you know, like some people clicked with it right away, and then other people definitely didn't like it. It was way too much curve. And then the stab in the dark thing happened, and for me, I guess I was expecting someone like Jack to click with the board, and just the way that he surfs is a pretty
Right.
good match for the design and stuff. And then the year that I heard it was Italo, I kind of just had no idea what to expect,
Yeah.
because his boards are the exact opposite of that design.
Right.
And I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I mean, if he likes it, killer. If he doesn't, I guess I'll probably know why, because it's not
Yeah.
like what he rides normally. And then he loved it, and I kind of just, that was the major curveball for me when I was like, oh
Right.
wow. The cool part about the board is that it feels like it's pretty malleable to different styles and techniques, and I think that all kind of comes back down to the rocker, and that it's a pretty user friendly curve in a sense of you can turn from anywhere on it. Has a
Mm.
big sweet spot where
Mm.
boards with more drastic curves and like more, you know, kind of what I was talking about, those staged rockers, I feel like your foot kind of has to be in the perfect spot to unlock its performance, where
Mm.
The pros were a little bit more like you can turn from the middle of the board, you can turn from all the way back, you can turn with your foot a little bit in front of your pad. So I think that's kind of been the reason why that one's been successful, is just because it has a big sweet spot.
Interesting. Yeah, that was the question that I had for you. I was going to ask you is like, what are the pros and cons of a staged rocker versus a continuous rocker? And so it sounds like the continuous rocker, you're going to be able to turn it from anywhere. It's going to be, I mean, it makes sense. It's going to be easier to turn, right? Because the curve is more continuous. But then the stage rocker, what would you describe as being when you'd want to ride a stage rocker versus a continuous rocker? Maybe when you need more down the line speed because you want that kind of flat spot on the board to generate speed. Is that where you would say the stage rocker shines?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, so just different for everybody in the way that they move and the way that they read a wave. But I would say the theory behind a stage rocker is that you can kind of move your feet up on the board and you can kind of be planing and driving from this flatter curve, and you can get a lot of down the line speed. And then when you want to go turn, you can move your foot back. And then there's a pretty drastic kick back there. So if you're moving kind of from the back half of your board, then you can kind of step back and maneuver. Um, which I mean, in theory, that totally makes sense. I think that there's a handful of surfers, on the team that would prefer that kind of style board versus something with a ton of continuous rocker. But for me, I just feel like the kind of surfing that I was trying to do, I was wanting to really link and flow between my surfing. And I found it harder to do that on a stage rocker board just
Mm,
because it's water flowing, like water kind of, there's a natural flow that's going to happen, and hydrodynamics through like the curve and the bottom contours and all that. And I felt like a stage rocker board for me is if I want to get up, go really fast, and try to do maybe like one big thing.
right.
Um, and then I'm going to ride a board with a little bit more constant curve and, mellower, probably. Yeah, I guess just less harsh of a curve, and that'll kind of help me be able to just feel and link throughout a wave in its entirety a little bit more. So I think that's kind of why you're noticing a lot of the guys on the tour riding the pros or a variation of the pro, because it is a little bit more designed to putting a whole wave together
Right.
versus maybe something that you're going to get way more speed and have a little bit less control, but maybe sometimes you're going to make something really big and really impressive.
Right.
Um, so it's funny. A lot of the guys on the free surf roster of Channel Islands, I think, are riding boards with, flatter rockers like the Kale Walshes, the Rolos, the Atons, Danes. And that's kind of how they surf. They go really fast and do huge shit. And that's like, everybody loves to watch that. And then
Yeah.
I'd say there's like more, a lot of the guys on the roster that are competing. And even though I'm not competing, I guess I'm kind of trying to put together like long form waves a little
Yeah.
bit more so than others. And that seems to be the crew that's gravitated towards that continuous rocker.
That makes sense. I was about to say, because I one of my favorite boards is a sampler, one of Dane's boards, and that thing has a stage rocker as well. And his style is definitely just like, go really fast and then be super aggressive and do one or two moves. And then your style is yeah, you're putting together this entire wave. It's flowing, and so it makes sense the continuous versus the staged. I'd never thought about it in that kind of context, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Are
he can do both. Dane's
Yeah,
such a good surfer. He can jump on a flat rocker and put together and link a wave
right,
just as good on that as anything. But yeah, for me, I definitely notice a difference between the two
right.
styles of boards, and kind of my personal interpretation of it, I guess.
Yeah, man, I'm just imagining you guys though, like tweaking the fins, like just inch by inch, like millimeter by millimeter. Like at a certain point, you must think you're going crazy. Like, how do I isolate like a design change versus like how I'm feeling that day or the wave or whatever? You must like it must be hectic.
Oh, dude, we were losing our minds. I was driving pretty crazy because I'd have one and I'd ride, I guess just quick example, but we had one where I remember we moved the cluster really close together, and I was surfing these really bowly, tight, pockety waves. And I was like, Britt, dude, this thing's insane. I'm super psyched on it. I think we kind of locked in on our fin placement. And then I rode that same board at a wave that was a little bit more down the line, and I needed a little bit more drive. And I had a different board with the fins moved a little bit further up. So then I called him and I was all, I don't know, man. This one's kind of better. I don't really know what you want from me. They both feel insane. And so for the next little bit, I actually was getting same board, same file, same everything, but I was getting one fin cluster closer, and then I was getting another one spread apart and further up. And if the waves were, I wanted to project and drive a little bit more, I'd ride the one with the fins further up. And if I wanted to kind of have a more loose, swivelly feel, and I didn't need to cover as much distance, then I would ride the boards with the cluster closer together.
Man, that's just crazy how much work you guys put in to designing a board. I would imagine certain people think like, oh yeah, you just like shape the board, like they all look the same, like, but like you guys are dialing in all those tiny little details and just doing like a million revisions. It sounds intense, man.
So fun though.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fun. I'm sure it must be so fun. But you're probably like, when am I actually done with this thing? You're just like endless. I'm sure you're probably like still tweaking the board. You're probably like still having versions of it that you're like, maybe I could do this or I could do that. I don't
Totally.
know.
And that's kind of just as your surfing evolves, that's the fun part about surfing, and as you age or whatever the evolution of your surfing is, there's always opportunity to be able to match yourself with your equipment and then that equipment to the conditions. And I feel like that's the super fun game of surfing, is it's never going to get old. When I'm 55, the board that I'm going to be riding is going to be way different than the board I'm riding now, but I'm still going to be that weird tweaking kind of like, mentality of trying to just maximize my own performance for the waves at hand. And I think that's the never ending rabbit hole about surfing.
That's what makes it so fun. You're right. Right. And I mean, like Italo, he won on the 2.pro, right? As opposed to the original CI Pro, right? And that thing has less rocker, made sense for his style of surfing and the ways he was surfing in. So yeah, you can just continuously dial your stuff in. Well, we got to work towards finishing up. Got 3 last questions for you.
No worries.
What is your intention when you ride a wave?
Ooh, good question. My intention when I ride a wave, I guess, would be to express myself. And that obviously changes depending on the conditions. But lately I've been kind of trying to just enjoy riding the wave itself more. Kind of what I was telling you about how I'm trying to not overpower and press and try really hard. And if the wave calls for just cruising, then I'm going to cruise. And if the wave calls for, a huge carve or a barrel or an air, then I'll try that. So I feel like maybe my intention when I'm surfing now is to be able to adapt to the conditions and the board that I'm riding.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. If you had to surf the same wave for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Cloudbreak, for sure.
Cloudbreak. What size?
Any size. That's why that wave's so fun. It's fun from 2 feet to as big of a swell as you could ever imagine.
Oh man.
Yeah, but it's just, it's got so many different faces. It's got so much going on. It's a huge playing field, and it constantly surprises you, and it constantly just, you never figure it out, in my opinion. So as much as you try and as much as you want to, it'll still humble you and put you in your place. And one wave for the rest of my life, definitely going to be Cloudbreak.
Never ending rabbit hole. And
Cloudbreak
on and you'll be constant. Well, so that's the second part of the question. All right, let's say you're stranded at Cloudbreak and you could only bring one board. What would you bring?
Ooh, good question, man. Well, I guess right now my favorite board that I have is it's kind of a new version of the fish beard that I've been making. I don't know if it'll have some name, I guess, but it doesn't have a name right now. So I guess I'm just calling it my new version of the fish beard. But it's a 6.0 19 2 7/16 fish beard, which is way bigger than I normally ride it, but it's a 4-fin. And So it feels like it's just paddles easy. I know if I was surfing big Cloudbreak, I could paddle in and catch a wave on it. And then if it's small, it's got this incredible glide. So I guess I would say that board right now.
That sounds super interesting. I guess we're gonna have to keep our eyes peeled for when that bad boy comes out.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see where I'm in that tedious phase of trying to make it better right now. So we'll see. I love it as it is, but I definitely feel like there's a couple of things I could do to make it better. So working on that.
Oh man, sounds so fun. All right, well, thanks for joining, Parker. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And again, super stoked that you're doing the podcast. Feel like any platform like this to give surf nerds a chance to nerd out even more so is appreciated. So thanks for having me.